Hi, Elaine here. Today I'll be sharing how to create a to-do list in Affinity Publisher. It's not just any to-do list either. It's a magic to-do list. What's magic about it? Well, that would be telling, but hang around and you'll find out. The initial document setup doesn't matter, since I'll be placing the final design inside another file. But what I've set mine to is a single page, A4, RGB, no margins and no bleed. The first step is to create a table. Across to the table tool, draw out a table. I do know I'm going to need 3 columns and 12 rows. But the table itself needs to be a very specific size. So I'll set that in the transform panel. The width needs to be 93mm and the height 140mm. And using the layers panel, I'm going to double click to zoom in. My top row needs to be 17mm. Holding the shift key down, I'm going to eyeball that, pulling it down, and there is 17mm. That has the knock-on impact that row 2 is a different size to all the other rows. So clicking row 2 and then holding the shift key down and clicking row 12, I can then right click and select evenly distribute rows. Each of these needs to be 11.2mm. To check that, I'm going to use the table panel, and in the height option it is indeed 11.2. The next thing I need to do is make sure that my columns are the correct size. Whereas with the rows I need to hold the shift key down to keep the table the same size and just resize the rows, with the columns I don't need the shift key. I'm going to pull this back and this needs to be 11.5mm. Then column B needs to be 70mm, which means column C should, and I'm going to check the width in the table panel, be 11.5, the same as column A, which indeed it is. Next step, give some colour to this to-do list. Selecting the entire table, I'm going to give it a fill. So using the table panel, in the fill options, I'm going to the swatches, and I have a document palette called Magic To Do, and I have 2 colours in there, and I want this to be the primary colour, which is a candy coloured pink. At the moment, this table has borders and they are black. I don't particularly want any borders at this stage. I want to manually add the borders that I need. So selecting all the borders and moving to the border style, and I'm going to turn off the borders. I'll click away so you can see that they have actually all gone, and then reselect the table. The borders I need are inside borders, which we have an option for, inside horizontal. This time I want them to be white or our accent colour, and 0.5 is absolutely fine. And that is the inside borders done. The next thing we need to do is give a heading to this. In adding the text, we can see it's not in the right position. I'm going to select all the cells and to make sure here that they are aligned vertically to the middle and centred as well. Next step is to format that font. I have the perfect font installed. It is called Bohemian Typewriter. I'm going to make sure that the colour of that is set to the accent colour, which is white. And I think we'll get away with that being a bit bigger, so I'm setting it to 18. Next step. No to-do list is complete without little circles to check off as we go. I'm going to use a rounded rectangle for this. And just draw that out. I'm holding the shift key and I want the size to be 5mm. I will zoom into that, and initially on the left hand side I want these to be circles. So using my radius point, I'm dragging it in so it's a circle, and I'll make sure that the fill of that is also the white accent colour. I'll take the opportunity to name that as well, and that's going to be a task on the left, so task left. Zooming back out so we can see all of the table, and I'm going to repeat that. So ensuring I've got the rounded rectangle and drawing out another one, holding the shift key, making sure it's 5mm. This one is actually going to be positioned more over this side, and I want it to be square. So zooming into it and using that radius point to square that off. And at that point, I've got the shapes that I need. I need to name that second one, task right. And to force them to be in the correct place, it would make sense to add them to the table, pasting them into a cell. But before I do that, I'm going to do something that I do in a lot of these demonstration videos, which is getting that first one, using StudioLink to go into the designer persona, making sure I've got my task left selected. I'm going to convert it to a symbol. So click Create, and I now have a symbol. Selecting the square and click Create, and I have another symbol. At that point, I can go back to Affinity Publisher and the Publisher persona. These task shapes now need to be transferred to their final location, which is inside the table. Command and X to cut it, double-click the cell and paste, and do the same with the task on the right. Select it, cut it, double-click the cell and paste. Obviously, I need more of these, 11 to be precise. What I will do with that, I know I need 11, I've got 5 there. If I copy those 5, that will fill the gap. Then move across to my circle, make sure I've got that selected, and copy. 2, 3, 4, 5, grab the 5 and paste them in there. I could leave it at that, but I do actually have a shape that I can add to this, which is a paperclip, and I have it in Affinity Designer. I know it looks like there's nothing there, but that's because it's white. If I select it, that's the artboard. If I open up the artboard, I can select the paperclip and copy that. Switching back to Publisher, I can then paste that in. Put it on the left-hand side. I would put that at the top edge, just hanging off. It would make sense to add an effect to that, an outer shadow, just so we can see it. Nothing too distracting. 4 points and 2 points will probably work quite well. Then I can zoom into that and make sure it's positioned appropriately. So take it up a little bit. And then back to the table, and there we go. Now, before we use this design for real, let's see how, with easy changes, this design can be repurposed. I have an examples file. Here's one I did earlier. And these are identical. They are just formatted slightly different. All the same elements, the only difference is the formatting and different headings. So let's see how we would use what we've made in a real layout. I'm going to fold up the layer that is the table. Might as well name that while I'm here as well. Selecting the table, holding the Command key and clicking the paperclip as well. And I'm copying that. So I said I had a pre-existing layout, and I do. So going to the weekly layout here, you should immediately see why it was very important that the sizes were correct. Because I have one square in the lower right that's going to contain that to-do list. Pasting it in and then moving it into position, and you can see the whole thing matches perfectly. And just for the giggles, because we can, let's see what this would look like in a data merge. This file is already hooked up to a data source, so it's a simple matter of just running the merge. So up to Window, down to Data Merge Manager. It is planner dates. There are 2 sheets in there, one for October, one for November. Make sure it's up to date and click Generate. Close the window. Let's check what pages we've got. So it starts on Monday the 30th. There is my first week, including the holidays. It's coffee day on the 1st of October. Let me know what your favourite coffee is in the comments. I can't abide coffee myself, not even the smell. But I digress. World Smile Day is much more me, and that's on the 5th. The second week, no holidays at all, but you can see our to-do list has rippled through. Third week, we have International Repair Day and Harry Potter Book Day. In the third week, Apple Day. I wonder if that's Apple Kit or apples. And we have the 5th week as well, which hosts National Cat Day and International Internet Day, as well as Halloween. What changes can you make to this? Well, let's see. Going back to the pre-merged weekly layout, and the first thing that you can change is the actual data. So we have October, but if I go back to that pre-merge file, and I go to Window, Data Merge Manager. Without changing the data source in terms of the spreadsheet it's coming from, I'm going to change the sheet within that spreadsheet, make sure that's up to date, and generate that. Close the file. That gives us November, which starts on a Friday. And within there we have Guy Fawkes Day and the US election. That's symbiotic, isn't it? Anyway, let's move on. Remembrance Day, World Kindness Day. In essence, a completely different month. Effort required? 0. You've done all the work. So that was changing the data source. The next thing you can do is change your global colours. You don't even have to go back to the pre-merge file, make the changes and re-merge. You can do that in here, in your final file. The document palette has rippled through. There's the primary colour. Let's edit the fill on that. And that changes everything on this page and all of the other pages as well. Let's zoom into the to-do table because we took the time to make these shapes symbols. So let's zoom into one of these as well. Selecting that, you can see we have our radius point on the left-hand side. If I take that so I've got rounded corners there, you should have seen in the layers panel, it changed all of them. So all of the task left has now got rounded corners. And the one on the right-hand side, if what we wanted there was that to be circular, make a change to one of them because they're symbols, it ripples through. It ripples through not just on this page, it ripples through on all of the other pages as well. That was also why we had 2 different symbols, one for the left and another for the right. Were all those customization options magic enough for you? I certainly hope so. I know they make my life a lot easier. So let's have a quick recap of that. Make a table. I used a specific size because I already had a layout ready for this to be added to. Mine had 3 columns, 12 rows. One of those rows was a header row. The other 11 were task rows. Format the table. I added a background colour and inside borders. I added a heading, and then I added a rounded rectangle shape for the task on the left, another rounded rectangle shape for the task on the right, and I styled those shapes to be circular on the left and square on the right. Then I used StudioLink to convert them to symbols. Next, I cut each one of them and pasted them into one of the table cells. I added a paperclip, which was purely decoration, and then copied the whole design and used it in an existing weekly planner page layout. And that was why the size was important for my design. That layout was already hooked up to a data merge source, so I was able to quickly create a month's worth of pages. And for customizations, I used specific features to make the final design as flexible as possible. I was able to change the data source, global colours, and symbols. If you want new tutorials and tips and tricks on a regular basis, check out my free training at elainegiles.com/VIP. Hit the subscribe button and notification bell so you don't miss future tutorials. And if you have any requests for specific tutorials, be sure to contact me. I would love to hear from you. Thanks for watching and see you next time.